All right, I'll call the CPRB Community Forum meeting to order. I'll start with a roll call and then I'll ask the board members after that to introduce themselves a little bit. McConnell.
Here.
McDaniel. I will maybe wait for her to come. Townsend. You're on mute. Orville, if you could please turn that off.
Present.
Great. Nichols.
Here.
Okay. And I do know that Daniel's works, so we might have a little bit of time before we get to her. We'll do the introduction of the board members. I'll start with myself. I am David Selmer. I'm the chair. I've been here in Iowa City since about 2014. I've been serving, this is my end of my term will be coming up on June 30th. I've been serving for 4 years here on the board. My family and I are located here at Iowa City. We take place and take part in a lot of the community activities, help out at the food shelter once in a while, and are really proud of the community that we're in. Not from being around here originally. We both transplanted here and just really feel fortunate to end up in such a cultured city and one that has as much to offer as it does. And we're proud to take part in the ways that we have with this board. So I'll pass it over to Jerry next, if you want to talk about yourself.
Hi, I moved to Iowa City from Spencer, Iowa in 2012. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and that's where I had my professional experience. I was a psychiatric social worker. I'm married. I just got married in September, and we live at Ecumenical Towers. I really love being downtown. It's since quarantine, it was real quiet last year, but I'm anxious for the festivities to start again because all I have to do is walk half a block.
And Jerry, how long have you been serving on the board? You can introduce yourself.
I just started in June, I think, June of 2020.
One of our longer volunteer serving members, somebody that's both been chair and vice chair and chair again. We're glad he's part of this board. Orville, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Yes, my name is Orville Townsend, and I came to Iowa City in 1962 on a football scholarship. And after I graduated from the university, I worked with vocational rehabilitation services working with citizens with disabilities for 42 years. And the last 20 of those years, I supervised the Iowa City area office located here in Iowa City. And basically, I've been very active. I've been on the school board. I've been on the judicial committee, and I'm currently on my second term here on the police review board. And I love Iowa City. It's my home, and I'm very protective of it.
And Amanda, if you could please introduce yourself and let us know about your term on the board.
I've been on the board for just under a year. I've lived in Iowa City for 21 years. I've worked at the university hospital for almost 15 years now. I actually have 2 terms starting there in September, and I'm the director of Corridor Community Action Network.
Great. We also have other members, part of the CPRB, our legal counsel, Pat Ford. Pat, do you want to say something really quick?
Sure, thanks, David. Yeah, Pat Ford's my name. I am a partner at the Left Law Firm here in Iowa City. I'm one of those guys that's not very unusual in the fact that I came to go to school at Iowa and never left Iowa City. I think there are a lot of us around. So I am independent counsel for the board. I'm not an employee of the city.
Okay, great. For those of you that aren't familiar with the CPRB, I'll now give a small summary of what it is that the board is responsible for. We are a 5-member panel currently. One of our members will hopefully be joining us shortly. We are volunteers. We get appointed, but there's no pay or anything related to our carrying out of our duties. We were established basically to provide a complaint process into claims of Iowa City police misconduct. It allows an avenue for civilians to make a complaint to someone other than the police department, or also have their complaints to the police department be reviewed by a panel of their members, civilians, making sure basically that the Iowa City Police, having looked into it and deemed whether or not there was misconduct that occurred into a particular case, is what they did was fair, thorough, and an accurate investigation of that. The chief of police and or the city manager would be the ones that would make a final determination as to whether or not misconduct took place and how to carry that out. We would review that after they filed a report with us and decide whether or not, again, that we thought that was fair, thorough, and accurate. A complaint to the board is basically just an allegation of misconduct against a police officer. And as far as the ultimate disposition and discipline presently, that lies exclusively with the chief of police and the city manager. Ours is more just as to opine whether or not the investigation was thorough and whether or not the misconduct occurred and took place. Besides that, we review police policies, procedures, and practices. There is an independent auditor that helps look into the policies and the compliance already in place for the Iowa City Police Department. And as a consequence, they are reviewing a lot of the policies, and we are on that same schedule where we review them for the changes. Our power is basically just to recommend modifications to them. We make certain recommendations to the chief or to the city council, and we hope that some of those get enacted. It's usually a back and forth dialogue exchange with the chief of police to try to align our interests and explain why we want certain changes of policies. We are not a court of law. We're not supposed to be a substitute for any form of legal action against the police department or the city. People can still file civil claims in court against those officers. And we're only limited to civil administrative review powers. We have no power or authority over any criminal matters, or, like I said before, any kind of police discipline. We are merely just supposed to be reviewing and kind of sounding the alarm, shining a bright light on areas that we think need attention. And we do that by presently filing a public report. All of our reports you can review online. And every year we publish the number of sustained complaints or non-sustained complaints, so you can track that. Other things that we do presently that we've been expanding some of our oversight would include going into certain types of excessive force matters and looking into whether or not those were things that we want to examine more closely, or if there's any policies or trends that we can glean from the information that is shared with us on a regular basis. Then we can open up some of those complaints ourselves. When we do have a chance to review a complaint, we can set several levels of review. Those include using just what the police department has provided to us, with no additional investigation, interviewing complainants, interviewing witnesses, all the way up to hiring our own independent investigator if we determine that that's necessary. Those are our levels of review. And again, it comes down to sustained or non-sustained as far as what the chief has done. If we agree with the chief, then that's basically what our report consists of, and it stays there. Recently, we have amended our ordinance so that if we disagree with the chief of police or the city manager, we have a chance to meet with them and see if we can't get them to, if we can't align our decisions and try and talk through why we have a discrepancy in how we viewed this action. And then again, we would include that in our report. So that's a little bit of a thorough explanation of who we are and what we do. I'm one of the members that serves a 4-year term, as I said before. And if you want to file or review for more of what we are or who we are, I'd encourage you to go to icgov.org, or just type in Community Police Review Board of Iowa City, and you should have access therein to our webpage that has a lot of our updates on public meetings, agendas, contact information, as well as more information about the board members and some of our duties again, as well as our bylaws, which is where our powers come from, our standing operating procedures, and any of our forum summaries or public complaint reports, as well as annual reports, are all provided to you in those areas. Sorry about that. Zoom is a funny time when you got dogs. So I want to remind the audience that this is a public forum, which is a public record, and it's being recorded for rebroadcast on City Channel 4. Now I'd like to read in some of the correspondences. So we received a couple correspondences related to this forum that I'd like to about. If you can bear with me 1 second here. Okay, so our first correspondence I'm going to be reading is from Brad Geyer. He sent this April 11th to the Community Police Review Board. He says, almost every day there are more stories about officer-involved shootings, and thankful nothing tragic has happened in Iowa City yet. Reading the requirements listed in a recent Iowa City police officer job posting, there is no mention of general protect and serve motto of policedom, or otherwise requiring basic conflict resolution or de-escalation techniques for the job. He asks, why not add protect and serve the community, or add a preference to candidates having conflict resolution or de-escalation training? It would publicly show that the next generation of officers are expected to maintain the high standards of the current force and potentially prevent a tragic situation from occurring. The response that we have is from our chief, Dustin Liston. He wrote back, I appreciate the comment and agree that de-escalation skills are essential. We provide initial and annual training in de-escalation techniques to all of our staff. It is a critical component of the 40-hour crisis intervention training that all ICPD officers attend. Any formal training in de-escalation would undoubtedly be viewed as a plus for our potential hires. Respectfully. Our second correspondence that we have is from Temple Hyatt, sent May 10th, 2021. She writes, due to the state preempting local control, Iowa's county and city governments can no longer designate county and city properties, excluding schools, as gun-free spaces unless there is an armed guard present and a metal detector screening process. How do we notify the public that these spaces, library, recreation centers, government offices, are no longer gun-free spaces? And how do we protect city and county employees? Thank you, Temple Hyatt. Can I have a motion to accept the correspondence?
So move.
Moved by Townsend. Can I get a second?
Second.
Seconded by McConnell. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Okay, the ayes have it. Before we go on to item number 4, meet the police chief. Does anybody want to address Chief, you otherwise, that final correspondence?
Sure, David. Thanks for the opportunity. Unfortunately, I received that email before I got a chance to respond. It had already been posted. So I believe I've talked to Temple about this before. I know she has some strong concerns about that. Unfortunately, we don't have any control over those laws, whether they're gun-free zones or not. We just, our job is to enforce the current laws that are on the book, and we'll do everything we can. As far as how do we notify people that those facilities are no longer weapons-free or gun-free zones, we don't. I think that would be on the whoever's managing that facility to do that. But I had this conversation, I think, at the last CPR meeting about the, we certainly have to address the gun culture in Iowa. The laws, you no longer need a license to carry anymore. So that's something that's certainly something we are concerned with, and we just have to make sure we're enforcing current laws to the best of our ability to protect the people.
Great. Does anybody else want to comment on that correspondence? Okay. Then without further ado, I'm going to introduce Chief Liston. If you would kindly go and tell us more about your background and how it is that we came lucky enough to have you as our chief here in Iowa City, that would be great.
Thanks again, David. Unfortunately, some of you guys have probably heard this. In fact, I think Orville could probably give my introduction better than I can. I think he's heard it so many times. But I was born and raised in Iowa. I grew up in Eldora, and I moved to Iowa City in '93 to go to the University of Iowa, and I was at the university from '93 to '97. In '97, I did an internship with the Iowa City Police Department, and that was my first formal experience with law enforcement. And I was very impressed with the department at that time, and it really made an impression. My brother from Iowa as well had gotten a job in El Paso, Texas, which is in far west Texas on the Mexican border, for the El Paso Police Department. He invited me to go down and live with him, rent-free, I might add, and try to get on the department. So that's what I did, and I started the El Paso Police Academy in the fall of '97. And I spent my entire career there until 2020, when I retired as a lieutenant. At the time, I was the director of a fusion center that was run by the El Paso Police Department. What a fusion center is a multi-agency intelligence operation. There are 80 fusion centers in the country right now. There's one in Iowa. It's in Des Moines. Texas has 8. So that's where I was when I left. When I was in Iowa City, I fell in love with the city and the community, and always was looking for the opportunity to get back. So I I'm a big Hawkeye fan, so I obviously followed Iowa sports and followed local politics. When I noticed that Chief Matherly was retiring, I thought it was a good opportunity. I was at a point in my career in El Paso where I could look for other opportunities. So I put my name in the hat, and about 8 months later, my wife, native El Pasoan, and my 2 children moved to Iowa in the dead of winter. And so that was a shock to the system, but we're all very happy to be here. It's really important to me to be in a community that I was familiar with, that I really care about, and it's a real privilege to be back and to serve in this community.
Great. Well, welcome back again, and we're glad to have you here. We will now turn to item number 5 on the agenda, which is an open discussion regarding the proposed changes to the CPRB and the restructuring of the police department towards more community policing. To give some background, the City Council had requested a report and recommendations from the CPRB, us, regarding changes to the CPR ordinance that might enhance our ability to provide effective civilian oversight to the Iowa City Police Department. So in response to that, the board members, the 5 of us, worked very hard to navigate a lot of the challenges that large changes into ordinances would entail, as one can imagine, and to discuss amongst ourselves various solutions, to come to accord wherever we could. And we ultimately resolved to having 13 recommendations that we made to the board. I will go through them very quickly in summary form, just to familiarize people with what they are and kind of give an update on the status of where those are. The first one we proposed was that in instances of a sustained misconduct complaint, meaning that there was a complaint that the CPRB and the police decided there was misconduct that took place. The CPRB should also be given information about the corresponding discipline, and that we also be allowed to include in our report findings on whether discipline is reasonable and fair. As it stands right now, as I said in the introduction, we are only opining as to whether or not discipline took place, or I'm sorry, whether or not misconduct took place, and whether or not we agreed or disagreed, sustained or didn't sustain with the findings of the chief of police or the city manager. Now we are asking for that authority to be expanded so that we can also opine on the discipline, and we be provided some of that information. On March 23rd, in response to our proposal, the City Council requested that they have time to conduct a legal analysis. On April 16th, we requested a time estimate from the city to see where we were in regards to that change. On April 22nd, the city attorney said their analysis was on hold until the state legislature acts on amendments to Iowa Code Chapter 80F, which they are posturing that would answer the legislative authority without necessarily having an ordinance change for us and address those directly. Then we go on to item number 2 that we requested, related to number 1 but broken out. We requested that we shall have the authority to request City Council have a disciplinary hearing. Our thought on this was that if we are reviewing the discipline, assuming misconduct was found, and we disagreed with what that discipline was going to be, we wanted to do something besides be the administrators of that discipline, and instead maybe ask the City Council themselves to have a full-on hearing, so that they might be the ones that could determine whether or not the discipline that the chief or the city manager was warranted and was fair and reasonable. Similar timelines on this. They requested legal review, and presently when we asked them for the update on that on April 22nd, they said it's on hold, waiting on Iowa Code Chapter 80F, which would reportedly address us directly. Proposal number 3, we asked that an accused officer be required to comply with CPR investigation or be disciplined by the chief of police and the city manager. As it stands right now, we can ask the individual officers as part of our level of review to partake in an interview as to the incident, and they can decline to partake in it. Similarly with a name clearing hearing, which is if we are going to find discipline, if we're going to find that the officer committed misconduct, rather, if we're going to find that that took place, then we have to give the officer a name clearing hearing. I think in those instances, the board would like to speak with the officer, and personally, they can decline to attend that name clearing hearing as well and to give a report. So we're asking that basically that it be written into their duties that they have to comply with the CPRB requests. We are in a similar state for status on that one as we were with the others. Our 4th request was that a complainant shall have the right to respond to the chief's findings in the chief's report before the CPRB shall conduct its investigation. So in other words, you recall it, I said that the complainant could file a complaint and then the police chief and or the city manager would file a report with its findings of fact for us to review. And we wait for that report to be filed before we undergo our own investigation. And the proposal we're proposing right now is that those findings would also be given back to the complainant themselves so that they might be able to clarify or review it and let us know if there's anything else that got overlooked in what the chief did or what the chief categorized it as and found it as. On April 14th, the city attorney drafted that for approval. And those will be presented, were presented to City Council on May 4th, and that part of it was approved. Part of that is that the online database of officer complaints shall be improved to allow for quick searches of complaint history and a computerized risk management system to analyze trends. And that again is basically just to allow us to have quicker access to make sure there aren't officers that are repeat offenders, so that we can also, again, look into trends and see if there is a pattern of certain demographics that are being more subjected to misconduct and those type of things. And having an online database of that that is quickly searchable, not just by us, but maybe on our website for everyone would, we think would help with those type of analysis is taking place and putting the right procedures in place to curb them where needed. The 6th one is that all complaints of misconduct shall be included in the police department's monthly disclosures to the CPRB. So we talked at the beginning that we have certain complaints that we get to review. Those are the ones that come in straight to the CPRB. We are now asking that we be given all of the complaints, both the ones that were brought right to the CPRB and also those that were filed just with the police department. The chief, upon hearing this request, agreed to it, and so we are already moving forward with that one since April. The 7th one that we asked for was that the CPRB should be provided with additional information in the police department quarterly reports to review for certain trends. Again, some of the things that we were looking for on this had to do with the number of arrests and the type of arrests, the type of stops, dealing mostly with demographics, following racial trends and those type of concerns that we have. This one, like the other one, was discussed with the chief, and the chief agreed to it, and so we are already implementing that since April. The 8th one is that the CPRB should have the authority to hire an independent auditor to review the police department's internal investigation procedures. we assigned this to a task to a subcommittee. What we were looking for was basically for us to have someone come in and analyze all of the policies and whether or not the policies were written fairly and accurately, and or compliance with them was being conducted fairly and accurately. Upon closer inspections, we had learned, the CPRB did, that the auditing system within or an independent auditor that exists already is already effective, and we are very satisfied with the independence of that auditor, and we are withdrawing that request for additional authority. The ninth one is that the CPRB shall be provided city funding to promote awareness of the CPRB and enhance accessibility to its services. We're looking for various things here, including just more advertising, letting more people in the community know who we are, what we're doing, and to try and explain some of our roles within the community. Also looking to, relatedly, item number 10, access to a lawyer and social worker, some with medical professional trauma awareness training to kind of assist complainants throughout the complaint process, whether it be filling out appropriate forms or just to handle some of the stress and trauma that it equates itself with going through something, a perceived complaint, whether it be something that might be sustained or not. So that was something that we wanted to bring through. We have asked that one, and City Council requested legal review on that. We are on hold for all those until Iowa Code Chapter 80F. But the city also asked us for a proposed budget on that, trying to work with us on it. And we have developed into subcommittees to try to solicit to various organizations within the community to see if they would take up this task, and also what their financing would look like for such services that they might provide. We've got 3 more to get through, so I'm sorry if this is a little bit boring. The 11th one is the expand the membership of the CPRB from 5 to 7 or 9 members. What we wanted to do there is put an emphasis on minority representation, and also a representation from a current or former member of the police, or a police policy expert. I think it can't be understated that we are volunteers that have some training that we take on through here voluntarily at times, but a lot of times we are not professional. Obviously, we're not trained with all of the police procedures or personnel. Having a police policy expert or a current or former member of the police on here to help assist us with that, besides just the chief, who has always allowed us to ask him various questions and give him responses on what the policy is and why it's in that place, and try and give us a police perspective from it would be essential. And obviously the minority representation in like of when we today society, we want as much of that involvement as we can from minorities, so we can get their perspective, make sure that their interests are being fairly represented in our community review here. That one is being passed by the city attorney. I would say on that one that, especially in recent times, it has been very laborious for our members, and we spend hours and hours on a lot of these issues that have come up, including what we're going over right now. We are restricted a little bit on our 5 members to only meeting as a quorum, or not meeting as a quorum, which means that we only get subcommittees of 2 people, and then we have to re-report. So having 7 or 9 members is actually really fruitful in the sense that we could have larger subcommittees and a lot more meetings without having the quorum requirements in place. The last 2, the 12th one is that the CPRB complainants should be permitted, whether they're filed anonymously or through third persons, so long as there is sufficient knowledge of the underlying circumstances. What we're looking for there is basically the fear of retaliation I think can be present, and we don't want people to feel as if by coming forward that they're going to feel some of that retaliation, or maybe it's too personal for them, so they don't want their names on there. And we do as best we can to protect both the identities of the officers and the individuals alike. But we feel that, so in some cases, filing something anonymously is there's good justification for that, and we should permit it, with the exception of they have to prove that there is sufficient knowledge, personal knowledge of the underlying circumstances, which is kind of a safeguard check against frivolous cases being filed. That one was requested legal review by the City Council in March. We requested a time estimate, and it was told to us that it would be dependent on legislator acts on amendments to Iowa Code Chapter 80F. The last one is simply a statute of limitations extension. As it stands right now, there's 90 days after the date of the alleged misconduct for a person to file a complaint. We just wanted that bumped to 180 days, and that was approved after the May 4th, 2021 presentation. So that's where we stand right now. There's a lot of thought and consideration went into each of these, and we'd be happy to answer questions about why we implemented those or made those requests, and maybe didn't make others or drew the lines where we drew them. I could tell you there was days and special meetings of discussions, where we went back and forth on a lot of this, and it probably isn't perfect, and there's still room for lots of changes as we're all kind of changing in our community right now. But I do think that we've made some really good strides here, and I'm proud of being part of this program as we're making some of these proposals and seeing where things go. And so with that, we'll have public discussion with us. I'll ask if you are participating on Zoom from your computer, you can use the raise your hand button and you will be called on to speak. If you have called in by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. We'd ask that you limit your comments to 3 to 5 minutes, depending on how many people we have. We might be able to take additional comments if it wraps up rather soon. When you do comment, please state your first and last name, and please remember that we are being broadcast on television, being recorded. This time I'll turn it over to the public.
Okay, first speaker is going to be Temple Hyatt.
Hello, Temple. How are you?
Good evening. I'm good. My name is Temple Hyatt. I'm a resident here in Iowa City. I'm also a member of or a volunteer with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. And some volunteers in our Johnson County group have been reading through the preliminary plan recommendations and seeing if the content actually aligns with a policing policy that our policy making arm, every town, has created. And I have a couple of questions on that. And if this isn't the appropriate forum, or if there's someone else that can help with that, would be happy to follow up there. But you mentioned tracking some more demographics with regard to use of force. And one of the things that they want to make sure with the data that's being tracked is if there would be, you obviously have a lot of published regular reports about officer use of force and misconduct investigations, but do those reports include victim race? And I don't recall seeing a column for that data, and just wanted to see if that was going to be part of the database that you referred to earlier that was going to be created. And then also in just reading through some of the information about the reporting, again, just seeing if this aligns with the every town policing policy, do the reports of shootings and other use of force incidents actually get reported to the FBI?
As far as the demographics and reporting goes, yes, that is some of the things that we've asked for to be included in the reports. Chief, do you want to take it on with the FBI?
Sure. All of that is reported, and we currently do, use of force does track race as well. So you'll see that the public can certainly see it on the next annual report. We're working on the rough draft of that. It should be out soon, but that is currently tracked.
Okay, thank you very much.
David, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? David, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I have a question. We did in our recommendation, one of the deals was that the information not only be made available, that we collect, not only be available to the board, but we were talking about creating a cloud so that public would have access to it too. You know, where are we with that?
I know all of our reports and things are accessible on our database or on our online website presently. So if people have an interest in having access to the reports that we're receiving, which would include the use of force and those type of demographics that we're talking about, those are all published there. So I don't know about the cloud and online database system that we're trying to get up in place is still being reviewed and under ADF. Hopefully we'll have some more legal room for some of that.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Dion Broxton.
How's it going? Can you hear me?
Can you hear Mr. Broxton?
So I have several questions. I guess, would you like me to ask them one by one or to give them all to you at once?
Whatever you think is best. We can try by, all at once, and then we can kind of take maybe a little bit of time.
Okay, so one, is there somewhere where I can find this list of 13 requests that you guys have?
I believe those are on our online website. If they're not, we will make those available to you.
I looked, I couldn't find it, I'm sorry. Of those 13 requests that you guys have, what are some of that are your priorities right now? I did hear that some of them are approved, like extending the 90 days of an accused action to 180. Can you just tell me about some of those that are your priorities?
They're all priorities.
I agree, Orville. They're all priorities, and we had originally about 25 or 26. I think that we kind of culled down, and most of what we were looking for are all right now on all 13. Each one of them are important for various reasons, and we think would improve and enhance the system. Certainly, I think I would let the board members speak for themselves, but for me, it would be having some review of the discipline and being able to opine as to whether or not we think that the discipline is carried out. Because right now, as the system sits and has sat since I've been on this board, we might all agree that misconduct took place, and that's the end of it. That's all that the board serves to say in its report, is that the investigation was thorough, that misconduct was found, and we would agree. But we have no idea if the discipline resulting is, a 1 day, administrative leave or if it's termination, and we don't get access or privy to any of that information. And that's not, that's right now prohibited by law. And so it's not as if that's just being withheld from us because the chief doesn't want to share that with us. It's prohibited. And so we're asking basically to amend that and allow us to have that type of information. And that's a major one for me, and I think would really give another peace of mind to the civilians that we are watching what is happening when misconduct is being reported, and that it's being dealt with fairly and accurately. I'm sorry to finish. If anybody else wants to opine on that one.
I'll throw out my second question if no one else wants to chime in. How involved is the Citizens Police Review Board and the restructuring of the police department plan? I know you guys have your 13 recommendations or your 13 requests right now, but are you involved in any other aspect when it comes to reforming the police department?
What we do that's kind of related to that, and we're not, I would say we are limited only by what our ordinance allows us to do, which again allows us to review complaints and also review policies that are in place and make recommendations on those policies as to how to change them. We also do an oversight review of general trends like we discussed. And outside of those three things, we don't really have any powers. But kind of related to your question, we do have that power to make recommendations to policies. And so we're reviewing those constantly on every meeting and making various suggestions and having exchanges with the chief of police as to whether or not we think that those are aligned with our community goals and values, and whether or not there's room for improvement and some other changes that we can make. An example of one would be the domestic violence statute. We asked that some of the protections that state law had would also be fortified and written right into the policy directly for domestic violence, if an officer committed domestic violence on the force and the repercussions that would happen there. Another one, for example, would be we are currently reviewing and looking for perhaps an ordinance change on the general orders for body-worn cameras, and what happens if an officer deactivates the body-worn cameras. Well, he's supposed to have it on according to policy. We also presently, in this last meeting, if any of you had observed it, we are in the middle of, with the subcommittee, with Ms. Nichols, making some proposals towards the general overall policy and overarching goals of the police department. But they're very much confined to recommendations within those policies only.
Yeah, David, I would just like to comment on that also. I think it's important that the public understand that you have to look at the mentality that you have in your approach. And, our approach is not that the police department's no good. I mean, I'm speaking for myself as a member. It's that I'm not feeling that the police department's no good and we should just chunk it. I'm approaching it with the fact that it's not perfect. And, and with it not being perfect, some citizens may be getting fair treatment. The question is, what can we do to improve that situation? And I think the things that we're putting in place, basically gives more access and to us, and we're trying to give more access and accessibility to the public. But the bottom line is, if people know that they're doing something wrong, that's one thing. But if they know that they're doing something wrong and that they're being watched, that's a totally different scenario. And I think that's what we're trying to be. Like, if we've got some police that aren't doing things that the way they should be done, then let's put some things in place that will offset that.
I have one more question, then I'll shut up. This is for the chief. what do you make of Councilmember Loris Burger's comments last week about abolishing the police department? And what has it, I know you only started in January, but just how caught up are you with all these changes that are going on, and what are you optimistic about, maybe pessimistic about?
Well, I try to avoid commenting directly on individual comments from council members, but I will say I had a conversation with Councilor Burgess before she published her editorial, and I'm optimistic about a lot of things. One of the things I'm optimistic about is the support from the community. We've seen a great deal of support. And listen, my eyes are wide open. We know no police department is perfect, but I'm proud of the Iowa City Police Department. I think we've been ahead of the curve for a long time. This board is an example of that. This isn't common in most cities. So that's what I'm optimistic about. And I'm optimistic about the community. I know it's a very engaged community. You can see the number of attendees at this forum. That gives me optimism that people really care about the police department and care about the community and want to make positive changes that impact everyone.
Okay, and Mr. Broxton, we can definitely send you those 13 recommendations using the email you registered with.
I found it. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. Great. Okay, and next one is Joe Coulter.
Yes, I want to begin by saying how much good the CPRB has done. You're working very well. Also, I've had over the years considerable contact with the police department in a positive way in terms of their being sensitive to issues in the community. But I do want to raise several issues that I think the CPRB, as well as others, such as the Human Rights Commission and other community organizations, should look into. These are three issues. One is qualified immunity. People need to understand what that means. I think the police department, the city needs to create a situation where everyone understands what qualified immunity means. The second is that there are a number of recommendations that were made by the OIR independent review. These are fairly considerable. They focus mainly on the problems from last summer and the use of tear gas and other means to break up the demonstrations that were taking place. And I think the OIR independent review recommendations are certainly something that all of us need to become better familiar with. Finally, there's the city manager's plan for enhancing the community police and making it more of a community piece. There's a number of recommendations in there that I think the CPRB, as well as the police department, as well as the public and other elements in our community need to address. With that, with those three issues, I'll conclude. And again, I appreciate how much the CPRB has done and how hard the police department is working and the city manager to improve and move towards community policing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coulter.
Okay, next speaker is Susan Bryant.
Hello, my name is Susan Bryant. I'm a resident of the east side of Iowa City. I'm also a volunteer with Moms Demand Action. I have two areas of questions, please. One is the responsibility of the CPRB for either recommending or reviewing policy and procedures of the police department. And I was wondering if that recommendation or review authority is restricted to only those policies and procedures that relate to officer behavior, or if it extends to any or all policy and procedures of the department.
That's a good question. So we review policies and procedures for all general orders that pop up, and they're basically it's a scheduled cycle that we go through, but we can also spontaneously or on our own raise issues. And recently, for example, we re-raised the issue of the body worn cameras and are making adjustments to those.
Okay, thank you. My second question regards one of the recommendations, which would include additional communication about the CPRB to the public. And I was wondering if there are or is any kind of communication plan that has been developed for that recommendation, and would like to suggest or recommend that some kind of tracking system be posted online for the status of the recommendations, so the public knows which recommendations are still pending and why, which recommendations have been accepted. And particularly helpful, I think, would be indication as to which or what state law and change in Iowa code is impacting positively or negatively the implementation of a particular recommendation.
David? In response to that question, that seems like that's the information or report that the city council should release.
I think it's noted that you're asking for more of a public disclosure of where we stand, a more readily accessible public disclosure of where we stand on our 13 proposals that we have presently, or perhaps I'm mistaken, Ms. Bryant, are you asking about where we stand on our review of individual general orders as they come up?
I think both would be helpful.
On our agendas that are posted every time, there includes both the policies that we're going to be reviewing and the changes to the ordinances that are proposed. And then we have our open discussion. This is all open to the public, so people know. When we have not resolved it, it gets carried forth to usually old business, and we post it there, or maybe even other new business if we want to raise something new. And so you'll see those on the agendas as they work their way through. And essentially, until we resolve it, you'll see those line items on our agendas all the way through. Ultimately, when we resolve it, so to speak, just so we're clear, we are not legislators. We are just making recommendations that don't necessarily have to be followed. And so those recommendations would also be public, and you'd be able to see those as we disclose our monthly reports.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, and then let's see, Dan Cobble.
Hi, can you hear me? Hello?
We can, Mr. Cobble. Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm okay. I have one thing that I would like to comment on. I was just wondering about the relationship between the Iowa City Police Department and the Iowa State Patrol. I'm not sure if this would be the proper forum for that, but I think it's an issue that definitely needs to be raised because, I mean, out of all of the police agencies in the state of Iowa, the State Patrol are definite bad actors. You can see that from the June 3rd tear gassing to June 6th, when the protesters who were trying to march on the interstate were told that they were going to be sent home in coffins. And as can be seen from the tear gassing on June 3rd, the State Patrol were clearly behind that, and they didn't partake in the inquiry into that. And so I would just like to know what's being done to make sure that the Iowa City Police Department is not aiding the State Patrol in the terrible things that they're doing. So that's my comment and question. Thank you.
Chief, do you want to handle that one?
Sure. As most of us are aware, the Iowa State Patrol has jurisdiction statewide, and that includes the city of Iowa City. So whenever there's an incident similar to what there was during the summer, there's usually a unified command where leaders from all the agencies or supervisors from all the agencies get together and try to make decisions as a unified group. And then the final decision depends on who has overall authority. And as you guys know, the State Patrol has the authority over the interstate. So they're probably going to be the ones making that decision. And then it's up to the rest of the unified command to work with them and figure out the best way that we can accomplish the mission. So all of that was covered in the OIR report. And as Dan mentioned, for whatever reason, State Patrol didn't participate in that, but the other agencies in the community did.
Chief, I have a question related to that. The incident that happened last June, you know, and the report that we got back from we got some interesting information. And one thing it highlighted is that when you have a situation where you've got multiple organizations working together, but you've got one specific organization that's in control, a question that I have is that we train our officers, and basically I think we do a good job in focusing on right and wrong. In a situation where orders are given by the organization in control, but it appears as though that's not fair to the public or it's inappropriate, do our officers have the right to basically disregard it, or because it's a cooperative agreement, or are we obligated to have our officers to go along with something that may not be the best practice?
Well, you're putting me on the spot, Orville, but as you know, I'm working on the response to you asked for follow-up on those complaints. And I think I have about another month to get that done, but I want you to know I'm working on it. But I can tell you, generally speaking, not talking about specific incidents, you guys are well aware of our duty to intervene policy. And so we do have that as policy, and including everyone in the county has that. So if they see something that they think is illegal, or an officer or someone using excessive force, they have a duty, a requirement to intervene. So we do have that. But as far as the June 3rd specifics, still working on that, and we'll have them for you at the end of next month.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I don't have any new speakers, but Temple Hyatt would like to speak again.
Hi, I just had a couple of follow-up questions regarding the personnel early warning system. Part of the Everytown policy recommends deploying formal tools to identify officers who pose a risk of serious misconduct. and encourage counseling, retraining, reassignment, or intensive supervision. So I'm just would like you to elaborate on the personnel early warning system. And I'd also like to know if the Community Police Review Board has any involvement in that outside of, specific complaints regarding use of force.
Well, that's a good topic, Temple. Thanks for bringing that up. One of the things that we do, and that's partly through our accreditation unit, which was the organization, it's an organization called CALIA, and they are the outfit that Chair Selmer had mentioned as our outside auditor, and they make sure our policies are in line, and that we are following the policies, and that's one of them, the early warning system that we have to create a report. I believe it's quarterly on tracking the number of complaints or the issues or uses of force that certain officers have, which would get us, give us some people call them red flag, and how we address those. So we certainly subscribe by the early warning system, and we are following that. I'm not familiar with CPRB being involved in that. David, maybe you can chime in.
Yeah, we are only reviewing the policies and compliance, but we don't have any, if someone were, for example, part of that early warning system, we don't get that as a misconduct type review complaint or anything presently. I think one of the things that we are doing that we've proposed is to have better online tracking and a better database for misconducts against officers. They're all assigned an individual number, and it should be easy enough for us to implement a quick research tracking system so that if there is repeat offenders and some kind of a pattern forming, we would be able to identify quicker. And then we could, as part of our proposals, ask for a separate review of that and make various recommendations. Again, it comes down to just making recommendations, but at least it would be something that we could highlight more publicly.
Yeah, David, I have a question and a request. We had one of our recommendations asked for to have an audit. And then after we talked to the chief, we discovered that they already have an audit. And, by the way, thanks, Chief, for making that available to us. It really answered a lot of questions. But my question is that if we haven't done it already, can we fix it so that instead of our audit, that we automatically, the Police Review Board automatically gets a copy whenever it's done of the audit that the department does?
Yeah, so I'll just clarify a couple of things. We knew that there was an audit procedure. Most of us did. It was just one of those of whether or not we wanted a separate independent one that just the CPRB could implement and instigate. Upon further review, I think we satisfied all of the members that the audit agency that has already taken place is independent enough and is carrying out the same goals that the CPRB would have its own independent investigator do. We spoke with the chief of police and he's already agreed to disclose that. It has made those disclosures to us of that annual auditing report. And so we have that present.
Yeah, Chief, how often do you all have that audit done?
It is an ongoing process. The formal audit, that large document that you guys received, that's 4 years, but it's an ongoing thing. I'll have to check to see how often if they provide an annual report, but it's constant. That's part of the schedule of the general orders that you receive as well. We have a schedule where we constantly are reviewing orders and making sure they're still up to speed.
Okay, and my question is that in the future, can we fix it so that becomes a part of the procedure where whenever that's made available, that the Police Review Board automatically continue to get a copy of that?
Yep, we'll get to you what we get.
Chief Liston, I just have a clarification. The personnel early warning system. Does that process include counseling, retraining, potential reassignment, or some form of intensive supervision where applicable?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Susan Bryant would like to speak again.
Excuse me, I was muted. Yes, this is Susan Bryant with one very quick question, I hope. It is really comforting to live in a community that has the CPRB. And I was just wondering if there were any national association, national standards for a community police review board, or if it is very idiosyncratic to each community that actually has one.
I have not been able to find anything like that. I've looked a little bit. I think it's very individualized.
Okay, thank you.
It is individualized, but I do think that more recently there's been a lot of suggestions and organizations that are stepping forth and making proposals, and we've all kind of relied on some of those, mostly through internet searches and others, including looking into other cities like Cedar Rapids and their quest for developing a community police review board. So I think that there is some of those that are accessible. I certainly relied on them and some of their suggestions when we were all debating what we wanted to propose for our own enhancements and how to increase our own oversight here. One thing I want to say on that, again, I'm going to be resigning, or the end of my term is coming up on June 30th here. And it's been a pretty remarkable change, I feel like, with the community involvement here, and even the idea that the CPRB is going to start getting some more of its authority. Throughout my term anyway, I was always comforted by this board and what we did. And my biggest thing I would suggest is that we do provide some oversight into when misconduct is being claimed. You can go to your neighbors and say, hey, can you make sure I'm getting a fair shake here? Can you make sure that what's happening is being investigated accurately, and that you kind of stand by it? And we should all sleep a little bit better at night knowing that there is a board here that is non-biased and willing to just look at things with a fair set of eyes and say, hey, this looks good, or no, this doesn't look good. Let's raise a red flag and send it up by way of public report and say something doesn't smell right here. I know that a lot of times there are issues taken when we are not sustaining a lot of complaints and we are in agreement with the chief of police. Certainly that has been the majority trend in my 4 years here. But I would say to anybody that points to that as evidence that we aren't doing enough, it might be to the contrary. It might be that we are in a great city where we do have a chief of police and a city manager throughout various chiefs of police that have been able to, investigate misconduct as it's raised and do a thorough and accurate job, and that we have given that objective review and said, yeah, we agree. Just because we're not finding fault with police misconduct doesn't mean that we're just not finding it. It might be that it didn't exist. And I certainly will take peace and comfort in knowing that there's the people that are still here on this board. I'm excited about our new members. I'm excited about some of the proposals we have in place, and knowing that they're going to be able to give it that same set of eyes and that same set of objective review to make sure we're doing our best to have the police align itself with our community values. And I thank everyone for my service here, and everyone on the board here for continuing that service.
Yeah, and David, I think our city is unique in terms of having a police review board because not too many cities, have a police review board. I think Cedar Rapids recently, began to build one and has one in place. But, not too many cities have invested in such an endeavor. And, I just like to share, that I feel real good about it. It's like, we meet once a month, and basically every month our police chief sits in on the meeting, or he has a destiny to sit in for him. So, it's just not the police review board, is having an investment in it, but I think the police force and the city council and the city as a whole has an investment in it. And, I really feel good about, the existence of our board and what we're accomplishing.
Any of the other members want to share any parting remarks? Ms. McConnell, you're, yeah, there you are.
You're muted.
You muted, Jerry.
Unmute my audio. There we go. Hi. I believe we're the oldest police review board in Iowa, at least, that we were formed in what, 1997, 1995? But we have a pretty long history here.
Yeah, okay.
David, we do have another person that wants to
Okay.
speak. If
Great.
Just didn't know if you were trying to wrap up. Tammy Neiden. Oh, and she just lowered her hand, so maybe she changed her mind. Oh, there she is.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I was curious if the review board knows if there's a regular data collection on police interaction with mental health, not only crisis calls, but also interactions with mental health and inpatient hospitals, emergency rooms, and so forth. Do we have such data collected and available?
There's probably someone on this call who could actually answer that better than me. Kelly, would you be able to let David Schwint speak? Because if we have that data, he would have it. I think there are some issues with gathering that data. I know David's working on projects involving that, but there are certain things that some of it might not be as simple as it sounds. We just might not know what do we consider a mental crisis and not, but maybe David can speak to that.
Hi, this is Dave Schwinn. I just want to confirm you can hear me with this unmute.
Yeah.
Okay. We do have limited collection right now on behavioral health calls for service outside of care facilities. It's not routine for us to be called into facilities, you mentioned, for mental health calls for service. Moving forward, as part of the city manager's recommendations, we are looking to implement more robust tracking of crisis calls for service with a number of data points, including demographics, type of crisis, what the response was, if the criminal justice system is utilized, why that was utilized in lieu of other services such as mental health services that are available in the area and such. So limited collection right now, just because traditional law enforcement systems aren't designed to collect that type of information. So we're trying to kind of come up with a new reporting system and lead the way in that type of collection so we can better understand that moving forward.
As you work on that, is it possible to add? I know it may not be happening as often, but it does happen. Is it possible to add emergency calls where police are called into residential, ER, or inpatient?
If it is a crisis call for service or a call for service where officers utilize their crisis intervention skills, with the new reporting system we will be implementing, all of those will be tracked as well moving forward.
Great, thanks. And that would include schools as well, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
Thank you.
regardless of the physical location of the call for service, that data will be tracked because it's more on the behaviors that create the call for service and nothing more about where it actually happens.
Yeah.
Oh, so that wouldn't be captured in the data, that was a call from school or a call from a hospital?
Yes, whether the officer responds to a city park or a hospital or a group facility, this report would be completed and collect that information.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, David, I would just like to add a comment related to that. I was just thinking back earlier of a case that we had, and I recall that the officers, once they arrived on the scene, someone indicated that the individual was having a mental health issue, and as a result of that knowledge, you know, they treated that differently. And basically, you know, in my opinion, you know, this is what's important, is that when you do encounter a situation where a individual is dealing with mental health issues, that you understand that, you know, we need to treat this differently than we would just the regular situation. So I think basically, you know, our officers, you know, pick up on that and give a different level of services. And I think that's important.
We do have
Yes, I agree completely. And
Sorry, David.
Oh, that's okay. I just wanted to add there, I agree completely. One of the things that went right in that situation you described is there was an officer on scene that recognized that there was or had knowledge that there was a mental health issue there. The reporting system that we're working to implement would help that make that information available, even if one of the officers on scene didn't have previous experience with that individual. So more making that information proactively available to officers responding to an individual in the future that crisis situation may be the cause of future calls for service, so they can take that information into consideration on how to handle future calls.
We do have a couple more hands raised. The next speaker is Travis Brees.
Hi, sorry. WWL. I hope it's okay if I ask order. This would be for Amanda or Jerry, the members who are staying on for another year. I just want to know, when you guys had this annual forum in 2020, I think there was a lot, there was a lot of people here because, the energy around police reform was just so fresh last year. People found out that and everyone was filing, what was it about? What can you guys do? I noticed, there definitely still is a level of interest here and there's still people calling in, but how important is it for you guys to try to keep this community, some of your plans to continue to keep people interested in the CPRB?
That's extremely important to me. I think that if we're a community advisory board that is making recommendations on policies that affect the entire community, then the entire community needs to be involved in that. And it's important that we hear what people's opinions outside of the 5 people on the board are.
And then Joe Coulter would like to speak again.
I would like to mention our new Guide Link Center, that the relationship of the police department, the CPRB, even human rights and other organizations understand what is happening with the Guide Link Center, and that many of the things that happen that end up with sending people to emergency rooms or to some sort of shelter are really not serious police matters, but matters to make people and help people get better. And I think the Guide Link Center is an excellent, excellent source. And I'm hoping to see that the police employ more social workers or people with can understand psychiatric care and other things having to do with substance abuse, will steer more people to the Guide Link Center rather than putting them in jail or sending them to the emergency room, which is very expensive. I would like to hear the police chief respond to that, as well as you, the chair of the CPRB.
Well, thanks, Joe, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's something that's been a focus of ours since it opened in February. I'm also excited to tell you that the sobering portion of the Guide Link Center just opened last week, so that's another jail alternative for us. We have a fantastic partnership with Abby Ferenzi, the director there, and she's been just a great partner, working with all the local law enforcement agencies to get to know how we do business and how we can improve how we do business. As you know, it's an access center and it's a completely voluntary and open facility. So sometimes, unfortunately, some of the people we may deal with might not be good fits for that, but we certainly will use it whenever we have the opportunity. And if you look at the numbers, I don't have them in front of me, but we are their largest client. We're the ones who are referring the most patients, and we're going to continue that. And I think, as you mentioned, it's a great opportunity to get people the help they need, because as you all know, sometimes the help that we can provide as a law enforcement agency alone is not the help that someone needs to get their issues addressed, whether they be mental health or substance abuse. So that's where the Guide Link really comes in, and we are excited about that. And I think a lot of other communities will be looking towards the model that Iowa City, again, the Johnson County area has been a leader in this, and it's something we look forward to continuing.
And you asked for my opinion. I think it's an essential service, and I think to kind of echo some of the things that the chief says, one of the things we're struggling with right now as communities, identify what that role of the police department is. And for the longest time, when there was issues with mental health or public intoxication or addiction, the person that you called was the police department, and you know, they have a certain procedures and ways that are in place that we can all review, but until there is appropriate, better suited facilities like the Guide Link Center in place, it really makes it hard for those police officers to be that all-in-one tool. And we're excited about that implementation and some of these other programs that are being discussed and changing over to those forums. Certainly, I would encourage all of that. My previous life, I was an attorney here in the city, and a criminal attorney, and I went to drug court. It was excellent experience, and I was really proud to be part of that and to see how some of these alternative methods saved the community lots of money, saved families from being torn apart, and put people on the right track, and prevented them getting into a system that is not meant and not designed necessarily to handle some of these issues that aren't necessarily what we consider violent type crimes or crimes against other persons. And so I would love to see more of those implemented. I think there's only going to be better things to happen to us as a community the more we can get those involved. And I'm optimistic that the police are going to take full advantage of that. I'm sure they are as relieved. I really truly believe that they are as relieved as all of us that they have another answer, another tool in their toolbox for when they encounter some of these people and they have to do something with them. They don't want to do the paperwork. They don't want to sit down and arrest these people and put them back into the system. Is my true belief on that. And I'm grateful that we have this as an alternative solution now.
Yeah, David, I'd just like to make a comment. One of the advantages or disadvantages of being in a place over a long period of time is that you get to see the various phases. And I remember like back in the 70s and the 80s, the Iowa City Police Department had more of an attitude, an atmosphere of to protect and serve. And basically, they were really working for the advantage of the citizens. And I guess, the question is, what can we do to get back to that? Because I think that's a big key, is the attitude and mentality of the department. If we can protect and serve, then you're working for the citizens and not turning them into victims.
Well, I certainly appreciate your experience, Orville. You've been around a while, and I appreciate that, but I'm going to have to push back a little bit. I think the department still is a protect and serve, and I watch those videos every day and watch officers bend over backwards to de-escalate, and it's a hard time to be a police officer right now, and that's fine. We signed up for the job. We go into it with eyes wide open, but that's the impression that I get from the officers in my short time here, and that's certainly my focus going forward. And I know these officers have that in the front of their mind, is to protect and serve. So I do appreciate that, but I think we are there. We're not perfect, as I mentioned earlier. We have room for improvement, and we will keep trying to improve.
Not that I'm disagreeing with you, but I just want to say, when I say protect and serve, where we used to be and where we are now, I'm not saying that every officer is a negative. I'm saying that we can still protect and serve, but we have to deal with the reality that not all of our officers have that mentality. And a lot of people are talking about getting rid of the police, and my feeling is we don't need to get rid of the police. We just need to look at what is it with what we have that's not right and correct it.
Agreed.
I don't see anyone else with their hands raised at the moment.
Give it just another couple more seconds in case anybody wants the last comments. Okay. Well, I thank everybody for their participation. We got someone?
We do. Joe Coulter.
Not again.
Last time.
Yeah.
Well, Orville knows me. I just wanted to thank you, David Salmar, and our new police chief for the work that you're doing, together to improve our safety, our health, and protect us. So in my native language, it's miigwech. Thank you. Oh.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. And thank you all. Appreciate your attendance. I appreciate everybody's attention to this. I do think that there's a lot of enthusiasm still And I think it needs to carry forward. And I think we're all in this together, and we're all trying to figure out how to make this work for all of us. So with that, I will make a motion to adjourn. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Cal. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Ayes have it. The meeting has been adjourned. 7 o'clock, 7:05. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good job, David.
Thank you.